Do you ever stop and wonder how dark this series can get? A lot of the time, Danganronpa likes to joke around, and most of the community focuses on their favorite characters or lighthearted moments of the game. But when you actually think about some of the stuff that's happened in this series, it's surprising how these don't get brought up when discussing the topic. For this video, I wanted to present some of the darkest or most disturbing things within Danganronpa, since like I mentioned, I rarely see them get brought up in a discussion, so feel free to leave in the comments what you think is the most disturbing Danganronpa moment, since you know, all of us have different experiences and I would love to hear what others think of it. Either way, let's get on to the video. Nekomaru's death. Nekomaru is a great character and lived until chapter 4 of the second game. They became a robot after getting shot in the chest of chapter 3, but then became a victim within the next chapter. The main reason I wanted to talk about this one first is because I rarely see people talk about it and I want to kind of mention it, but it's how he ended up when you discover the body. As you can see here, he got beheaded, which is really dark, and this is the only time this has ever happened in the series. A lot of people just kind of discredit this because, you know, he's a robot or that his blood is blue, but this is still really disturbing that Nekomaru got beheaded. And again, it's just brushed off because, you know, he's a robot. Like, what? Like, this is really disturbing if you think about the pain and suffering that he had to go through. Even the game treats this less seriously by Akane just grabbing the head and picking it up at the end. But, you know, it's still Nekomaru. He still had the pain of his body parts being ripped apart. It's honestly very gross to think about all the details about this murder. Even if his main cause of death was falling, if this was an actual human or the blood was pink/red, a lot more people would have made a big deal about it, possibly even causing trouble for the game developers. Togami messing with Chihiro's investigation. In the first Danganronpa game, Chapter 2, Chihiro got hit in the head with a dumbbell and was left in the girls' locker room by Mondo. However, right after, Togami notices and walks in the girls' locker room to check out what happened, in which he sees a dead Chihiro on the floor, in which he made an effort to go back to the library, grab a wire, and then tie up Chihiro's dead body, smudge blood on his hand to create the lines bloodlust. After finding he did this, he explains that he did it to liven up the killing game, which he never does any other time in the game, and this has only happened once in the series for him, or just in general. We also find out that after the trial, Mondo carried Chihiro's body from the boys' locker room to the girls' locker room and laid them down there because, you know, Mondo wanted to be respectful to Chihiro, as his motive explains it. But then Togami walks in and he just does something that a psycho would do. Like, I get Togami was supposed to be this character that the player is supposed to hate and this broody antagonist, but just imagine this skinny, sick-looking man picking up and tying up a small, lifeless Chihiro is really disturbing. And again, nothing else similar happens to this in the series, it's just a one-time thing. Mikan's backstory. Mikan Sumiki is a character from the second game that suffers a lot from problems due to her past. These include physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. These would explain why she apologizes a lot and why she always worries all the time. She has said that if she was a punching bag, she would win first place, which in my opinion is kind of a way of saying that she's been physically abused before, which may explain the random bandages covering up her arm and her leg. But that's just speculating at that point. A pretty big theory too is that her hair is so choppy is because her bullies used to cut her hair a lot. The emotional abuse part comes from how much she says sorry, and that there are points within the game where she would do anything to be forgiven, even taking off her clothes. She also does this in the anime, but instead of being forgiven, in order to thank the imposter, her first reaction to this was taking off her clothes, which the imposter denies later on. Like, I'm not exactly sure why, and talking about this can be very touchy, but if this was her first reaction to these two different situations, it makes me and others believe that in her past she would have taken off her clothes as a way to deal with these situations. Either that, or people would make her take off her clothes in these situations, which would make her think that this is just a normal thing and that everybody does it, which, you know, would also go in part with the theories and just speculation that she gets sexually abused in the past. Judging by how Mikan is and the whole way she acts, this is most likely the case. The game hasn't outright confirmed anything about it, but you can definitely tell just by the way she acts and what she's been through that these are kinda true. There's even points where she apologizes for being happy, which it's even more proof that she's been abused by somebody or even multiple people. The last thing I would like to talk about on this section of Mikan or her story is her obsessive behavior. Seen within the anime over Junko, her talking about her beloved, and sleeping with Hajime, she indicates a lot of what is called obsessive compulsion disorder, which many researchers in real life have said that this can be triggered by abuse, personal crisis, or a death of a loved one. Considering how quickly Mikan got obsessed with Junko in the anime, it would imply that her life before she entered Hope's Peak involved some type of abuse, like the ones we've covered. So yeah, a lot of evidence just points to Mikan being abused and having obsessive compulsive disorder, or short and OCD. Gonta's trial. During this section, I won't be going into Kokichi's motives because honestly, V3 doesn't leave a full answer to this, and anytime it's brought up, people always mention different motives or different incentives for the character, so instead he's going to be focusing just on Gonta's case. In V3 Chapter 4, there was a virtual world that the cast had to go in and find a secret to, but ended up with Miu Iruma dying and become a victim of the chapter. Gonta Gokuhara was the murderer, and once a murder happened, they all left the virtual world. After the trial, you find out that Kokichi had tricked Gonta into killing Miu for the sake of saving everybody, even though that on its own in real life would be very disturbing. I think the most disturbing thing about the whole thing is the fact that Gonta just doesn't remember anything that happened. He'd said that when they were all entering the virtual world, Gonta had misplaced his chords and had a memory error, which resulted in Gonta not knowing what happened. So in his mind, he just woke up to a dead Miu right in front of him. Even if Kokichi had good motives later on in Chapter 5, Gonta still had to go through a horrible truth that he killed somebody without his knowledge. And he considered everybody, the cast, like even the people he didn't like, as his friends. So it just caused for the trial to make him cry and question himself the entire time. And it's honestly a big reason as to when you see people play the game, people just hate Kokichi because of what you put Gonta through. Ruruka's death. Okay, so this one is specifically just Ruruka's death, because look at this. This shit is just so brutal, it's insane. During the anime, everybody gets sent to sleep after a certain amount of time, and it's revealed later on that the person closest to a monitor of the cast gets brainwashed into killing themselves. We even see this happen to Makoto, in which the monitor drops a knife for the person grabbing it to stab themselves. And we get to see this for all the other characters who died like this. It's only a single stab to the chest and nothing more. So then how did Ruruka suffer the same fate but end up this bad? We know it was her who experienced the brainwashing, as we see everybody else who was alive safe, and we even see the monitor glow up in the distance. So the fact that she stabbed her legs, her body, her eyes turned red, and there seems to be candy shoved down her mouth, I legit don't know how this happened, since it's the only oddity out of everybody who got brainwashed in the anime. And I don't think there was an explanation for this, because like I said, she should have only been stabbed in the chest and nothing more, but she's just this odd exception from the others. Either way, because of this, her death goes down as one of the most brutal deaths in the Danganronpa series. Ultra Despair Girls. This one doesn't really need much of an explanation, since Ultra Despair Girls is by far one of the darkest Danganronpa games, since the topics here are way more controversial than the other games in the series. It's a big reason as to why people skip out on this game a lot, since I've heard a lot of people say that the game makes them uncomfortable, and because of that they just stop playing midway through. I'll explain more stuff. Basically, the game is set in a location called Toa City. After Junko's plan to end the world worked, the Warriors of Hope, which are these 5 kids, basically take control of the city and let a Monokuma killing spree happen. Their plan is to make a world without any adults, and we learn why these 5 kids are very on-set for doing this. Daemon was abused and hit by his father. Jotaro was emotionally abused by his mom. She would tell him that she regretted giving birth to him and that she wished that her son would die the next morning. Nagisa was forced to work and study for unhealthy lengths of time by his parents to the point of him passing out. Kotoko was... I'm not going to explain it, but this screenshot says the whole story. And the last Warrior of Hope, Monika Toa. She acts very childish on the outside, but she mentions that she always feels like dying on the inside. Plus, it's implied that she has been physically abused before, and during one of these physical abuses, she pretended to be badly wounded to help stop the abuse. There's a lot of messed up things in Ultra Despair Girls, but the Warriors of Hope are probably the best example of the darkest things in this game. Executions. I'm going to end this video on the executions, as even though this is pretty obvious that this would be on the list, the executions are some of the most disturbing things about this series. I want to mention some of the darkest ones, like dragging someone by their neck and playing piano with their dead body, being in the position of climbing a spiked vine with each grab stabbing your hand, getting hit by over 1,000 baseballs with still being alive for most of it, believing that you killed one of the most important people in your life right before you die, going through a death chamber with different traps and never knowing if you're going to escape or not. All these examples are very good executions by the series. I understand there are really bad executions in the series which help benefit the lighthearted side of this game, but in conclusion, there are a lot of really disturbing and dark events in the Danganronpa series, some I haven't even covered. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.